The U.S. and Iran continue to exchange fire today following a major escalation in the renewed conflict. This morning, Kuwait's military says it intercepted new missile and drone attacks launched by Iran this morning, and Jordanian authorities have evacuated an international airport due to a, quote, specific and credible threat. Now, all this comes as overnight U.S. forces completed an 8th consecutive night of attacks on Iran in retaliation for an attack in Jordan on Friday that killed 2 American service members. U.S. Central Command confirmed the 2 deaths yesterday. Another service member remains missing after Friday's attack. In a phone interview with News Nation yesterday, President Trump called the deaths, quote, very sad, adding the troops died in service of our country. In total, 16 U.S. service members have now been killed since the war began in February, with more than 400 injured. Shortly before the U.S. military's announcement yesterday, Iran's supreme leader warned of, quote, unforgettable lessons in store if the U.S. continued attacking Iran, and called President Trump's signature on the agreement last month, quote, worthless and unreliable. Joining us now, Nancy Youssef, staff writer for The Atlantic. Nancy, thank you, as always, for coming to the weekend. Just before we came on, Reuters has this report. The Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, so this is coming from Iran, condemned a U.S. attack on the site of the nuclear power plant under construction. They are saying the strike violated international law. Mer news agency reported on Sunday without saying when the strike occurred. We should also make clear that MS Now has not verified details of the supposed attack. But let's just say, just take this at face value. What does that signal to you, if it is indeed true?
So it's the latest in an escalation of strikes by the United States. You talked about 8 days of strikes. They began as attacking drone boats, fast boats that were used to close the strait, missiles, defense capabilities, drone capabilities designed to stop the Iranians from being able to control the strait. What we've seen, though, since then is an attack on civilian infrastructure that the U.S. says is dual purpose. If this report is in fact confirmed, it says that the U.S. has further escalated in terms of the types of targeting that it is doing inside of Iran, all part of this pressure campaign to say to the Iranians that it is too costly to keep trying to hold on control of the strait. The problem is the Iranians are equally saying we want to impose costs on you, United States, to try to take away our ability to control that strait. And so while we're seeing an escalation, we're not seeing these strikes lead to a fundamental change of position by either side.
I think it's important that we, and you just said it, but keep reminding folks that attacking civilian infrastructure, things that's infrastructure used primarily for civilians, is in fact a war crime, according to international law. I want to put up what Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, said after news of these service members were killed. It's made 16 since February. Godspeed, heroes. Their sacrifice only stiffens our resolve. What I remember, and my dad was in the Army, and he was in Iraq and Afghanistan when I was in high school. And when somebody would die, George Bush we wouldn't tweet, but when he'd talk about it, the White House and the administration would talk about it and say, like, I talked to their families, I'm so saddened by it. But Pete Hegseth and this administration, it all feels like posturing often. And I can imagine there's one thing worse than getting the call that your loved one has died overseas, and it's that your loved one has died overseas in a war that the President of the United States has not explained, that there's no off-ramp to, that they seem to not have any kind of strategy. And when you look at this, because you cover both the Pentagon and like everyone that is around the military infrastructure, how is that playing within the ranks?
So I was at the Pentagon and in Iraq and Afghanistan, and so I saw secretaries of defense tear up at the loss of troops, write personal letters to the family members. Right now we're watching 2 family members get that horrific knock at the door. I think the challenge for the U.S. military right now is for the service members answering what is the end state the U.S. is trying to achieve with these strikes. Remember, these troops were in Jordan, and we've seen an escalation in terms of how far the Iranians are willing to strike into U.S. interests across the region. And so I think what the U.S., not only military, but I think the public is hungry for is what are the end states that the U.S. is trying to achieve, and at what cost is the U.S. willing to try to achieve them? We haven't had a public explanation of that so far. We've seen a move towards war. The U.S. hasn't hit Tehran, but we're getting closer and closer to a war all but in name a resumption, but we haven't heard why this is the best strategy, why these sort of escalation of strikes help the U.S. achieve its outcome. And so I don't know that the American public has been prepared for the U.S. casualties. And the other interesting thing I would point out is that the president has at times suggested going after Kharg Island, escalating strikes. If that happens, that will lead to further casualties. And so these deaths are tragic, and they're a reminder that troops are in harm's way, not just around the Gulf, but throughout the Middle East.
Right. It also seems as though negotiations are pretty dead at this point. We have an Iranian official and senior diplomat on diplomacy told MS Now, I just want to read what they said. A senior Iranian official told MS Now that the memorandum of understanding between the U.S. and Iran is, quote, no longer valid after days of fighting. A senior foreign diplomat inside Tehran who is linked to Iran-U.S. negotiations told MS Now that, quote, there is no hope of peace in the near future. So where are we? What does this mean?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was a key development yesterday, because both sides are trying to jockey for positions at a negotiation process that no longer exists. And so by taking that off the memorandum of understanding, I think it really exposed that memorandum, which was supposed to lead to a pathway towards a negotiation on not only the Strait, but on Iran's nuclear program, has in fact been the source of this instability, because both sides read it differently and are seeking to interpret it differently. And so now you have the Iranians saying, we're not even coming to the table. But in the meantime, they are both trying to put costs on the other, such that if and when they return to that table, that there's no question about what each side it has to give up to reach a long-term deal. It's a reminder that we're further and further away from diplomacy. Up until last week, the feeling was that while the strikes were eroding that trust, there was still hope for talks. I think what we heard yesterday is we're now in a position where we have to renegotiate even the prospect of talks.
It's a scary thought, especially since the administration, attacked the press for how we reported about the memorandum of understanding, and the fact that it seemed like from the very beginning that the Iranians did not view it the same way the U.S. did. Nancy Youssef, thank you for your reporting.